The sun was high over Franklin Park when it happened. A Saturday afternoon. Families laughing. Dogs barking. And one teenager sitting on a bench, alone, sketching in his notebook. His name was Jalen. 14. Deaf since birth. Smart, artistic, quiet. Always quiet. But that day? Silence wasn't a choice. Jalen didn't hear the shouting. He didn't hear the footsteps behind him. He didn't hear the command. Hey! You! Turn around! Hands where I can see 'em! 2 officers. One young cocky. One older tired. Either of them knew Jalen. Neither of them saw the hearing aid tucked under his hoodie. All they saw was a black boy who didn't obey. Jalen kept sketching. The younger cop stormed forward. Snatched the notebook right out of his hands. I said hands up. Are you ignoring me? Jalen blinked, confused. He looked up, lips parted. He started signing, rapid, frantic, trying to show he couldn't hear. But they didn't understand ASL. They didn't even try. The older cop crossed his arms. Scoffed. Oh, he's playing dumb. One of those. People began to look. A woman with her baby stroller paused. A jogger slowed down. But no one stepped in. Jalen reached into his pocket to pull out the laminated card he always carried. The one that said, Hi, I'm deaf. I use sign language. Please speak slowly or write it down. He didn't get the chance. Whoa! Hands out of your pockets! The young cop lunged. Grabbed him. Pushed him face first onto the bench. Forced his arms back. Cold metal closed around his wrists. You're under arrest for failing to comply. Jalen screamed. Not with words. With panic. A raw, guttural cry that tore through the park. A sound so painful, so human, it didn't need translation. The woman with the stroller gasped. She stepped forward. Wait, he's a kid. He's deaf. Look at his hearing aid. But the officers weren't listening. They were laughing. Oh yeah? Suddenly he's disabled now? Jalen's body shook. He couldn't speak. Couldn't explain. Couldn't fight. And then, a man sprinted through the park. Big. Broad shoulders. Tactical boots. Civilian clothes but military posture. He was moving fast. Toward the crowd. Toward the boy. His voice boomed. Take your hands off my son! The younger cop turned, annoyed. Sir, stay out of this. We're detaining a suspect. The man kept walking. No hesitation. That suspect is my son. Now the park went quiet. The jogger stopped. The mom with the stroller covered her mouth. The older cop took a step back. Jalen looked up, tears streaming. Recognition in his eyes. Relief. The man pulled something from his pocket. A badge. Federal issue. The kind you don't argue with. But it wasn't just any badge. It was embossed. Special Agent. Department of Homeland Security. And suddenly, the laughing stopped. The younger cop froze. He looked at the badge. Then at the man. Then back at Jalen, who was still face down on the bench, wrists locked in cold metal. I said, take your hands off my son. The officer hesitated. Glanced at his partner. The older cop stepped in, more cautious now. Sir, we were responding to a report. Suspicious activity. This young man was unresponsive. The man's jaw tightened. He's not unresponsive. He's deaf. He reached down, gently lifted Jalen off the bench. The boy collapsed into his arms, shaking, gasping. Still trying to sign, but his hands were trembling too much to form words. You see that? The man said, holding up Jalen's wrist. You cuffed a deaf minor. You mocked him. In public. For a condition he can't control. The young cop scoffed. How were we supposed to know? He didn't say anything. The agent took one slow step forward. He couldn't. A pause. Long. Heavy. The woman with the stroller spoke up again. I told them. I told them he had a hearing aid. They didn't care. The jogger added. He was just drawing. That's all. Now there were eyes on the cops. Not just from the bystanders, but from across the street, behind phones. Someone was recording. The older cop shifted uncomfortably. Look, this doesn't need to escalate. We can sort this out. It escalated the second you put cuffs on my son. The agent snapped. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone. Name. Badge number. Both of you. The younger officer laughed nervously. You threatening us? No, the man said. I'm documenting abuse. I'm doing what you should have done, file a report. You can't just. I can. I will. And you're going to regret every second of what you just did. The older officer tried to recover. Sir, we didn't know. Mistakes happen. You didn't ask. You assumed. You mocked. You humiliated my son in front of strangers. That's not a mistake. That's misconduct. His voice didn't rise. But every word landed like a gavel in a courtroom. Jalen was starting to calm down. His dad unlatched the cuffs carefully, checking for bruises. There were red marks, angry, swollen. He looked at the younger cop. What's your name, officer? Silence. I asked you a question? Brady, the young cop muttered. Brady, the agent repeated. You enjoy your badge while it lasts. Just then, a black SUV pulled up to the park's edge. Two men stepped out. Suits. Sunglasses. Earpieces. Federal. They nodded at the agent. Sir? You called? Yeah, he said. I need a full statement from my son. Photos of the injuries. And I want both these officers logged. Today. Now the park wasn't just watching. It was witnessing. The crowd had grown. More phones out. More whispers. The kind of energy that builds when power shifts unexpectedly. The young cop, Brady, was sweating now. Sir, can we talk about this privately? We didn't mean any harm. Funny. Harm is exactly what you caused. Jalen clung to his father, eyes wide. Still silent. But no longer afraid. His father glanced at him, then back at the officers. He may not speak your language, he said. But you're going to hear him loud and clear by the time this is over. The two federal agents moved in, collecting statements. Taking photos. Asking for badge numbers again. The older cop looked at Brady. What were you thinking, man? I thought he was just ignoring us. He was drawing. Brady didn't answer. Because there was no excuse left. And no one was laughing anymore. The heat was rising. Not just from the sun, but from the tension crawling under every word, every breath. Officer Brady paced. The older officer, Sergeant Mills, stepped aside and spoke into his radio. Low, quick. Nervous. Jalen was sitting now, wrapped in a jacket from one of the federal agents. His sketchbook returned, though crumpled. His fingers still twitched involuntarily, residual shock in every nerve. The DHS agent, Jalen's father, Special Agent Carter, stood like a stone wall. Silent. Watching. Brady finally snapped. This is getting out of hand. You think just because you have a badge, you can come here and act like we're the criminals? Carter didn't flinch. You acted like you were above accountability. I'm here to correct that. Brady pointed toward Jalen. I thought he was ignoring orders. You don't just not respond when law enforcement speaks. He didn't hear you, Carter snapped. And instead of asking questions, you used force. That's not law enforcement. That's a failure. You're twisting this, Brady barked. We were following protocol. What protocol allows you to arrest a child for drawing in a public park? One of the federal agents cut in. What protocol encourages mockery of a disabled minor? Brady turned red. So now I'm a racist? A bigot? That what this is? If the badge fits, the other agent muttered. Sergeant Mills stepped in again, trying to salvage what was left. Look, Why don't we let Internal Affairs look into this? We'll open a file, do a full review. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Carter turned to him slowly. A misunderstanding doesn't leave bruises. A misunderstanding doesn't get uploaded to social media by 6 different witnesses. This is bigger than your precinct now. Just then, a local patrol supervisor pulled up. Lieutenant Ramos. Hispanic. Middle-aged. Eyes sharp. She got out of the squad car, looked around, and realized instantly she had walked into a firestorm. What's going on? Sergeant Mills tried to explain. Carefully. Selectively. But Ramos raised her hand. Stopped him mid-sentence. Then walked directly to Carter. Special Agent Carter? He nodded. I've read your name. DHS. Anti-Terror Division, correct? Correct. Sir, what can we do right now to begin making this right? Carter glanced at Jalen. Then at the crowd still watching. Still recording. You can start by placing your officer on administrative leave pending investigation. Publicly. Right now. Ramos looked at Brady. Officer Brady. Badge and weapon. Now. Brady's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. We're in the middle of a... That's an order. Brady hesitated. Eyes wide. Searching the crowd for support, but there was none. Just phones. And silence. He unhooked his badge. Slid it into Ramos's outstretched hand. Then slowly unholstered his sidearm. This is bull. Not another word, officer. Ramos cut him off. You're done here. For now. Brady stormed off toward his cruiser, hands shaking. Sergeant Mills looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. But just as relief started to settle in, the twist came. Because one of the responding officers whispered something to Ramos. Low. Urgent. Ramos turned to Carter. Sir, we just ran your ID through the system as protocol. Standard practice. And? There's a federal case file attached to your name. The entire park shifted. Slightly. Like the wind had changed. What kind of file? Carter asked, calm but sharp. It's sealed, Ramos said. But the tag reads, Do not interfere. Protected asset. Level 5 clearance required. Now it wasn't just the cops who were confused. Even the federal agents exchanged glances. Carter stepped forward. Leaned in. Lieutenant, do you know what that means? No, sir. It means this isn't about one arrest anymore. It means this park is now part of an active federal review. You're opening a case? Ramos asked. Carter didn't answer directly. He turned to the federal agents beside him. Secure the scene. Interview all witnesses. And contact my director. Use the direct line. Yes, sir. Now it was official. Now it was bigger than anyone expected. And Officer Brady? He wasn't just looking at suspension. He was looking at a federal investigation. The sun was lower now. Shadows stretched long across the grass. But no one had moved. Not the jogger. Not the mom with the stroller. Not the kid on the bike who had been recording the entire time. They were all waiting. Waiting to see what would happen when the world flipped. Lieutenant Ramos stood stiff. Her radio still crackling faintly on her shoulder. The younger agent returned, face pale. Sir? We contacted the director. You were right. We're being rerouted. Carter gave a curt nod. Ramos stepped closer. Agent Carter. I need to ask. What exactly is your role at Homeland? He looked at her. Not smiling. Not threatening. Just steady. I don't work cases, he said. I write the standards. Standards? Use of force. Civilian interaction. Racial bias mitigation. Everything your department claims to follow, I helped build it. Now that landed. Ramos took half a step back. Your policy division? I was. Until they made me Director of Internal Ethics Liaison for Multi-Agency Operations. That title meant nothing to the civilians around. But to the police? It was nuclear. Because it meant Carter didn't just know the rules. He didn't just enforce them. He designed the playing field everyone else was standing on. Ramos swallowed hard. Sir, if I'd known. You shouldn't have to know someone's title to treat their child with dignity. The words cut like ice. And suddenly, the park wasn't just a scene of misconduct. It was a case study, and everyone involved was on the wrong side of history. Carter turned to the two federal agents. Secure Officer Brady's footage. Bodycam. Dashcam. Any surveillance from this park in the last 90 minutes. They moved instantly. He turned back to Jalen, crouched beside him. You okay, son? Jalen gave a small nod. Then lifted his hands to sign. Why did they do that? Carter's throat tightened. He answered out loud, for everyone to hear. Because people still think they're above those they don't understand. But they're not. Not anymore. From across the field, a reporter appeared. Someone had called the news. A cameraman followed. Ramos moved quickly. We can manage this, Agent Carter. We can de-escalate. You can start, Carter interrupted, by issuing a public apology. On record. To my son. To the bystanders. To every deaf kid watching this who's afraid of what happens when they can't respond fast enough. The cameras were rolling now. There was no way out. Ramos adjusted her uniform. Cleared her throat. On behalf of the department, I formally apologize to Jalen Carter for the mishandling, the use of force, and the lack of proper protocol. Carter didn't look satisfied. He looked tired. I'll expect that in writing. Signed by your chief. Before end of day. Ramos nodded. And then, from the crowd, a hand went up. It was the jogger. Sir, can I ask something? Carter turned. Sure. Would this have gone different if he wasn't your son? A long pause. Then Carter replied. Yes. It would have gone worse. That truth landed heavier than any lecture. Because everyone knew it. Everyone had seen it. Without that badge, Jalen would have been just another story. Just another headline. Just another statistic. But now the story was different. Now the system had a name, and it was his. The press was in full swing now. Reporters lined the edge of the park. Cameras pointed toward the scene where it all began, where a deaf black teen had been forced to the ground for not reacting fast enough. But now he wasn't alone. Now the world was watching. Jalen sat between the two federal agents. His father stood nearby, arms crossed. Calm. Calculated. Done speaking for the moment, but the silence around him said more than any words. Lieutenant Ramos returned. A clipboard in hand. Here's the preliminary report, she said, voice stiff. Signed by command. Officer Brady is suspended without pay pending investigation. Internal Affairs will review bodycam footage. You'll be copied on all findings. Carter barely looked at the clipboard. He won't wear that badge again. Ramos blinked. That's not for me to decide. No, Carter said. That's for the nation to decide. And today? The nation saw everything. Behind them, the mom with the stroller walked up to Jalen. She knelt beside him. You're so brave, she whispered. They don't get to define you. Jalen smiled slightly. Signed. Thank you. The jogger came next. Then others. A quiet line of support, neighbors, strangers, allies. One by one, they offered comfort. Not pity. Respect. And for the first time since it began, Jalen looked, grounded again. Not okay. But standing. Sergeant Mills stepped forward, clearly shaken. Sir? I just wanted to say. Carter stopped him with a look. Save it for the hearing. Then he turned to his son. Let's go home. But before they could leave, a voice rang out, sharp, panicked. Wait. Officer Brady came running. No uniform now. Just a t-shirt, jeans, and a face pale with regret. Please, he said. I didn't know he was deaf. I thought he was ignoring us. And that gave you the right to slam him down? Carter asked, stepping between Brady and Jalen. No, Brady said quickly. No. I was wrong. I messed up. Please don't let this ruin me. Carter paused. He studied the man. Then he said slowly, You ruined yourself the second you decided he didn't deserve a question before a punishment. Brady's shoulders sagged. There was nothing left to say. Jalen looked at his dad. Then signed something. Carter translated. He wants to know if you'd like to learn sign language. Brady's eyes welled. He nodded. Slowly. Ashamed. I should have done that years ago. Carter turned to his son again, whispering. You just taught him more in one sentence than any lecture ever could. And with that, they walked away. No fanfare. No applause. Just the image of a father and son, arm in arm, leaving the scene of the injustice that tried to break them, but failed. Weeks later, the video hit 1 million views. Then 5 million. People all over the country saw it, not just the violence, but the accountability that followed. The power shift. The truth. Jalen's school brought in ASL training. The department issued a new protocol on handling interactions with disabled civilians. And Officer Brady? Resigned quietly. But before he left, he wrote one final statement. I failed. But the kid I arrested gave me a second chance anyway. It was printed in the local paper. Just below the photo of Jalen at a city council meeting, smiling shyly, standing next to a sign that read, Communication is not a threat. And that day, Franklin Park wasn't remembered as the place where something went wrong. It became the place where something finally went right.